Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers alongside Todd Graffagnini. We just left the practice facility over at UC Irvine. The Saints finishing up their first practice of training camp. And everything looked pretty much business as usual for the Saints out there running through their individual drills, team drills. And we did see head coach Dennis Allen trying to kick things up a notch. Even though they're not playing in that heat and humidity, he wanted to test them physically, had defensive players doing up-downs to start, and then everyone ran gassers at the end. Todd, just off the bat, what are a couple things that stood out to you from the first day?
Yeah, good first day, as DA mentioned after. I think, he talked about this yesterday when he addressed the media for the first time, was the fact that you're out in California maybe gives them an opportunity to push them a little more. Would they have done the up-downs if we were back on airline? Maybe, maybe not. But out here, I think you can afford to do it, especially before practice starts, because you do 40 up-downs in the heat and humidity out there at the Oster Sports Performance Center, and you're basically gassed before you even take a rep of individual drills, much less teams. So I think it's just to the theme of what he talked about yesterday. Out here now, maybe they can push them a little bit more than what they would have been able to do if they were back in New Orleans.
A lot of players we were waiting to see take the field. Running back Alvin Kamara was a full participant, and he actually spoke after practice was over about his contract situation, how much he was planning on just being here no matter what, because he wanted to be here for his teammates. I just thought, his perspective on things was really refreshing.
I agree. Look, it was just really good to see him out here. He knew exactly what he was doing when he left minicamp, and now he's here. And the negotiations are going to be between the front office and his agent, and he wasn't going to take the fine, as we found out after, because it's a lot of money if you start missing practices in training camp. So he mentioned that, but like you said, it was all about being here with the teammates, and Derek Carr talked about him after as well. It's like that's a team guy, and it was just good to hear him talk. But it was even better to see him out on the field, and he was obviously full speed, did every rep, participated in every drill. So Alvin Kamara is in California, and he is ready to go.
Yeah, you mentioned quarterback Derek Carr. Both he and Alvin Kamara spoke about the new offense under offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak.
I'll say this: the main thing is, we've all made a commitment to each other to hold each other accountable. And it starts with Clint, and Clint is holding us accountable. Like, if it doesn't matter if I completed, a pass to Sheed today, it's gonna be like, I'll put it on this shoulder, not this shoulder, put it right here. It's like it's coached and it's in front of everybody. The starting quarterback to someone trying to make the roster, like, everyone is getting coached extremely tough, and the standard is the standard. And if I'm getting coached, he's really talking to all the quarterbacks. If he's talking to a receiver, he's talking to all the receivers. And we're all expected, once that point is made, to be on it. And so we'll go in there, and I'll have a handful of things especially from the first practice. There's always a handful of rust. And he's going to drill, he's going to call it out, and all that kind of stuff. And it's our job as players now to be like, okay, he said it, now hold each other accountable to it out here. And so I feel like we're in a good place. We ended in a good place in the offseason. I think we've picked up right there.
Man, I feel good. I think overall I feel good about where the team is going. I think it's some energy that we've been missing here the past 2 years. And then I just speak personally for offense. We got a revamp with a new coaching staff, new offensive staff, right? And I think the guys on offense are kind of buying into that philosophy, buying into the vision. It's refreshing to have some intentional help, right? And I think I love it. I think Derek loves it, being the captain of the ship. And I think it's just kind of like a breath of fresh air. Like, okay, all right, let's go. We can go now.
I just think that you can already tell, going back through OTAs and minicamp, that there's a lot of respect by the players on their new offensive coordinator. And I don't know if that's unusual, but in such a short amount of time, I think it speaks to Clint Kubiak and what he has done in the past. And like I said, son of a coach, and he's been around the game his entire life. And I also thought Carr mentioning that he's got a way about him where he is going to get on you, but it's not going to be yelling and screaming and things of that, but he knows how to get his point across. And I thought that was significant. I just was really impressed with the way that they talked about him. And again, he's only been here, a couple months. So it's good to have that respect very early on. And look, there's going to be a lot of moving parts here early. This is when it really starts to ramp up. OTAs and minicamp are one thing, but when you start putting the pads on in a few days and you really start implementing your offense, that's when you're going to see all the work really start to pay off.
You mentioned just his way to kind of let people know what's needed of them. I think there's been a clear point to be made of what expectations are and being detailed, and like the players have continued to talk about accountability. The coaching staff making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and if you're not, someone's going to let you know. And it's not in a, as you mentioned, yelling at you, calling you out, berating you type of way, but hey, this is our standard here and we need to get back to it. And I think that's big.
I think we're going to hear the word accountability a lot in the next few weeks out here in California. It was something that Alvin Kamara mentioned a lot during his time with the media today. And the sense of urgency that we heard Derek Carr talk about. It seems that it was a pretty interesting offseason in the building on airline, and just a lot of things had to be changed. So I think we're starting to see the implementation of those changes. And like I said, it's the first practice, so there's a lot more work to be done. But you got to believe that the message has been sent and, even more importantly, been heard.
Yeah, Kamara said that it's kind of refreshing coming into this season. There seems to be a little bit more energy. They have liked the changes on the offensive side, but even the defensive players have spoken to to that fact. Defensive end Cam Jordan spoke after practice, and he kind of also said, the time is now, spoke to the urgency that this team is feeling. He's going into year 14. And while he said he feels great and he's ready to go, that at some point there are players on this team that have been a staple of this team that are going to be on the back end of their careers. And yeah, if they want to go out and make something happen, get back to the playoffs, then it starts right now.
No, and the great thing about training camp is no matter what's happened, and look, it's been frustrating for the team, the fans, not to have made the postseason the last 3 seasons, especially when you think about the run that the team had since 2017. You didn't want to say, because you never can take it for granted, but you almost took it for granted that the Saints were going to be in the postseason, especially in 18, 19, and 20, when, it was almost Super Bowl or bust, because that's how good the team was. And it's got to be really frustrating for someone like Cam Jordan, who was, this close 3 years in a row, especially getting so close to the ultimate goal, which is getting in the Super Bowl. Of course, you can't win it all unless you get there. And now, the last 3 years have had to have been very, very frustrating. And like you said, when you're that deep in your career, you start to see the end a little bit. The good news is for Cam, he's healthy. He feels great. But, and Cam stating in his own way that none of that matters until you reach the ultimate goal, and that's to win a championship. But you can tell that he's starting to see the writing on the wall that, Father Time is undefeated, and you just hope that he gets an opportunity to at least go for a championship.
Speaking of health, we were able to see defensive end Chase Young on the field for the first time with the team. He was going through some individual drills, but took most of the teamwork off. He's getting hit for the first time in a while after having neck surgery, so I'm sure they're going to take things slowly. But there was a really interesting moment in practice when head coach Dennis Allen pulled Chase Young aside, and Coach Allen was getting in the dirt. Like, he was getting down, showing him some different technique types of things. And Coach Allen said, yeah, I was just kind of letting him know maybe how we do things here, how we've taught things here. He's been at two other teams and, giving him a little bit different advice to use. But it was interesting to see, Coach Allen taking that time with him and being really invested, even though, Young's still working back in.
Well, I mean, look, Dennis Allen's a defensive coach at heart. And I think if you Chase Young, that's a guy you want to listen to, because the Saints defense has been outstanding since Dennis Allen has been the defensive coordinator. So I'm sure, and look, all accounts, Chase Young is a stand-up guy. Again, we haven't really gotten a chance to talk with him as of yet. I can tell you one thing, just first impression, what a physical specimen that guy is. My goodness gracious. And if you hope that he can get back to 100%. Again, the good thing is that he's out here and he's got a uniform on and he's participating in some way. And you got to be cautious with somebody like that, because neck surgery isn't anything you want to play around with. So get him back to health. But my goodness, if that man reaches his potential, and we know it's pretty darn good, NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year 5 years ago, that is going to be wondrous for this Saints defensive line.
Absolutely. On the other side of the ball, the offensive line, something that we have been talking about, obviously, throughout the offseason. We mentioned yesterday with right tackle Ryan Ramczyk being declared out for the year. It does leave a lot of question marks across the line. Today, unfortunately, one of the offensive linemen, in Justin Erin, went out with a knee injury. DA said he didn't think it was anything too severe. Obviously, we'll continue to follow up on that. But that takes away maybe a little bit of depth, because he's somebody that could play multiple positions on the line. We did see a lot, though, of Penning there in the right tackle spot. Fuaga, left tackle. Saldiveri was working in again at left guard. And then you have your two mainstays with Cesar Ruiz at right and Eric McCoy at center. It's going to be interesting, though, because they do need to find some depth there. And then they also need to be sure that Penning is ready to take the next step here. If
you listen to Dennis Allen today, he still has all the confidence in Trevor Penning's ability. He's got to, every rep available, he's got to take. Last year when he was a healthy scratch, a lot of those games, you would think that he might have gotten in there just to be out there. But so he's still, even though he's in his third year, I would think rep-wise he's still behind where he needs to be. So he has got to take advantage of every single rep that is laid out for him. I don't think we had any surprises as far as what you talked about in the number one offensive line. Everybody who we expected to be in their position was out there. This is just such a huge camp for Trevor Penning, because he's got to establish himself as the starting right tackle. Because quite honestly, the Saints need him to be the starting right tackle and need him to be very effective if they want to go anywhere this year.
You spoke earlier about the undertones of what Cam Jordan was saying. He actually talked about Trevor Penning within his post-practice availability as well, and spoke to the fact that, it's time for Penning to figure it out. We can listen into it here.
As we know, I have a disdain for them, but some of them are really good friends, which is very, very, very much a conflict of interest. But with Trevor Penning, this is year 3 for him. It's time to cut. I don't know what anybody else is seeing on the outside in, but right now, between those lines, whatever it takes to win a Super Bowl. So if I can talk to him, hey, calm down, don't worry about it, throw hands, anchor, whatever it is, let's get him right now. Because I don't want to go ahead and get to season and be like, oh, well, we should have. I don't have time for should have. I have it right now.
Also got to see the first team reps of training camp. They did 2 different team sessions. The second set of teams got a little interesting, a little more competitive. Graff, what was your kind of play of the day here?
Well, I think it was really the only play of the day. First rep of team number 2, Derek Carr trying to hit Rashid Shaheed over the middle, and there's the captain, Demario Davis, stepping right in front. And beautiful interception. He took it to the right side and went to the house. So it was funny listening to Dennis Allen after, because, in training camp, it's always an interesting dynamic. Do you want the offense to do well? Well, if the offense is doing well when the defense is not, and vice versa. And Dennis Allen mentioned, well, as a head coach, you get to cheer every good play. And that was obviously a great play for Demario Davis, but it's something we've come to expect over his tenure here.
Yeah, Demario Davis is always going to surprise you. He's so smart, instinctive. He knows where to be at the right time, even though the offense is throwing a little different stuff at him this year. And a little bit of not so great news. Running back Kendre Miller did go out in the first rep of individual drills. DA said after the fact it was a hamstring injury.
Kendre's got a hamstring. Look, that's a player that's going to have to figure out how to stay healthy, because it's hard to make the team, when you're in the training room all the time.
All right, that does it for day one here in Irvine. Every day you'll get a podcast from Graff, myself, and sometimes JD. I think he's on the bench right now, but we're going to pull him up. He's a little under the weather. So we'll get him on here soon, get some of his thoughts. And then, of course, you can catch Graff and I on the Your View show live every morning at the start of Saints practice. So that's something cool we're doing this year, and it gives you a little bit different look in of what's going on at the start of these practices. You can see some of the players on the field, and we'll talk about the storylines each day. So look forward to seeing you guys again on that, and, of course, having you tune in right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.